Welcome to The Economy Magazine. I'm Ayman Siksak with today's roundup of stories from the world economy. Coming up, Xi Jinping visits Macao as the world's largest gambling center puts the Chinese financial framework to the test. And flying drones are set to become one of the most coveted gifts this holiday season. But first, the headlines. We begin with news from the U.S. The United States economy grew at its quickest pace in 11 years in the third quarter, the strongest sign yet that growth has decisively moved into higher gear. The Commerce Department on Tuesday raised its estimate of gross domestic product growth to a 5% annual pace, up from a rate of 3.9% last month, citing stronger consumer and business spending than previously estimated. This marks the fastest growth pace since the third quarter of 2003. GDP growth has now been revised up by a total of 1.5 percentage points since the first estimate was published in October. China's national airline, Air China, is set to buy 60 Boeing 737 aircraft in a deal worth more than $6 billion at list prices. The aircraft will be delivered between 2016 and 2020, according to the airline. The deal includes Boeing's next-generation 737 and 737 MAX aircraft, known for their fuel efficiency. In September, the world's biggest aircraft maker delivered the first of 7 aircraft to Air China. Boeing estimates that China would need more than 6,000 aircraft in the next 20 years as the leisure travel market booms in the world's second-largest economy. France's Alstom has pled guilty and will pay $772 million in criminal penalties to settle charges with the U.S. Justice Department, alleging the company bribed government officials to win business around the world. The settlement, announced by the Justice Department on Monday, marks the largest ever criminal fine levied by the United States against the company for violation of foreign bribery laws. The fine will resolve charges related to widespread scheme of involving tens of millions of dollars in bribes around the world, including countries such as Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the Bahamas. Malaysia on Tuesday deported nearly 500 undocumented Indonesian workers in a crackdown on illegal labor as the country's economy slows down. The workers were brought in shackles to Subang Airport, west of Kuala Lumpur, where Indonesian officials said they would be loaded onto military aircraft and flown to their native countries. According to Indonesia's ambassador to Malaysia, Herman Prainto, another 200 workers will be deported on Wednesday, and more illegal workers may be sent back next year. Israel-based Bank Leumi agreed to pay $400 million to U.S. and New York authorities on Monday, admitting to conspiring to help U.S. taxpayers avoid taxes by stashing assets in offshore accounts with the bank. The bank resolved the tax evasion allegations in settlements with the U.S. Department of Justice and New York's Department of Financial Services, agreeing to pay the agencies $270 million and $130 million, respectively. Bank Leumi is one of about a dozen banks, many of them in Switzerland, that U.S. authorities have investigated for enabling tax evasion. Monday's deal was made possible thanks to a program between the Swiss government and the U.S. Justice Department that allows banks to hand over data on Swiss bank accounts held by American clients despite Swiss secrecy laws. Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Macao to mark 15 years to the city's handover to China. Today, Macao is the biggest casino city in the world, but China's one country, two systems framework is challenging the president's message of unity, as China opts instead for financial division. Joanna Citrak and Daniel Roth have more.
It was a two-day trip to deliver a message of unity. Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Macau on the 15th anniversary of its handover to China. The president took advantage of this moment to defend the existence of several different economic systems within the same country.
One country, two systems is a basic state policy to achieve stability and prosperity for the development of Hong Kong and Macau. It is also a key contributing part to our China dream.
Like Hong Kong, Macau is regularly the scene of pro-democracy protests. Despite this, the two cities see their leaders chosen by Beijing. But the real difference between the two Chinese cities is that Macau is the premier casino city in the world and the only place in China where they are allowed. This leads millions of tourists to visit every year.
Xi Jinping's visit to Macau means that the central government in Beijing fully supports the Macau model of economic and political development, sending a message implicitly to Hong Kong that Hong Kong political development should ideally follow the Macau model of harmony.
The former Portuguese colony has a particularly strong economy. In 2013, its GDP per capita exceeded $91,000, the fourth highest in the world. Still, President Xi Jinping called on the gambling capital to diversify its economic base.
We should continue to make a plan to promote an appropriate and diverse way for Macau's economy to continue its path of development. It is important for Macau to adopt a global, nationwide, future-oriented and long-term perspective.
This makes sense even if Macau generated $46 billion from its casinos in 2013. Gaming revenues are down 23% in 1 year. And the decline is expected to continue as Beijing continues to put a magnifying glass on the city in its anti-corruption campaign.
Homeless veterans are much more than an aberration. The number of homeless children is at an all-time high, and this is mostly due to the nation's high poverty rate and a lack of affordable housing. This report has more.
When Felina Hall walked the streets of Washington on a cold winter day last year, she didn't know where her partner and two children would spend the night.
December 17th, that was that morning. We just didn't know where we were going to be that night. We both were out till about 12 o'clock that night, making phone calls, asking people. And no one, like I said, no one would take us as a family.
Felina and her partner had to split up. She went to a shelter with her youngest son, while he went to a relative's house with their eldest child. Now, with a third son, Felina and her family have been staying in the shelter for the past 6 months. The couple is unemployed and barely makes $300 combined on a good month. But this family story is far from unique. Recent reports show nearly 2.5 million children in the U.S. experienced homelessness last year, historic numbers that keep shelters across the country constantly busy.
Families are what are called the hidden homeless. They go to friend to friend to family to acquaintance for as long as they can until that line has ended for them, and then they have really nowhere to go.
The Doorways charity in Arlington, Virginia provides short-term housing for 5 to 8 families at a time. Dawood came here with his 12-year-old daughter 2 months ago. The single father bounced from friends' houses to hotels for 3 years, struggling to make ends meet as a chef.
It hurts because it feels like you're a failure in life, you know. Living with other people, not having your own, feel like you're not a part of society, you know. Then I feel like I was failing my daughter as a parent, you know.
Despite their struggles, Dawood says having his daughter was always motivation to keep going and now sees a brighter future for the pair.
I'm not a quitter. I don't just lay down and roll over and quit. I think from here I'm going to be all right.
Poverty, a lack of affordable housing, and domestic violence are just some of the reasons behind the rise in numbers. Though the government has made progress in fighting homelessness over the years, society's most vulnerable are still not getting enough attention to get permanently off the streets and into a home.
Now, the upcoming Christmas celebrations are seeing a new category of stars in the gifting industry: drones. The flying robots are becoming a desired commodity among consumers throughout the Western world. Here's more on the unlikely new presents under the Christmas tree.
15-year-old Andrew has put this drone at the top of his Christmas wish list. And he's not the only one. Thanks to the success of this quadrocopter, the Chinese firm that builds them has increased its workforce 100-fold in 8 years. For this particular model, Andrew's parents will have to shell out a meager $1,200.
I really like how it stays, it's static, how it stays in the same place when you move it. The camera itself.
Small flying robots are the stars of the LA Drone Expo. and they come in all imaginable shapes and forms.
This happens to be just a 4-channel simple drone, and it starts at $25. This is basically for children and parents, wanting to get something for the kids for Christmas.
More drones under the Christmas tree also means more drones in the air. A headache for the Federal Aviation Administration, charged with regulating the skies.
It's important that no matter how small the drone, that you're cognizant of your surroundings, that you're making sure that you're not operating the drone in a fashion that would endanger anybody. You're not spying on your neighbors in their backyards.
Even though drones are now available to the layman, actually flying one safely is another matter. Adam Gibson, a seasoned professional, runs workshops to help drone beginners take off for the first time.
To properly learn the system, I would say you would need about 2 weeks at about 20 hours a week.
To avoid crashes, you not only have to know how to fly your drone, but also how to set it up properly.
Yeah, a lot of the crashes that we see are from not properly calibrating the compass, or it could also be where someone has painted it. And when they paint it, it interferes with the GPS.
Once you have mastered the subtleties, the sky is yours. Unless you want to fly above 400 feet, that's the legal limit above which your drone might encounter flying objects of a much larger variety.
Yes, be careful this Christmas. And now, from one high note to another, let's go to Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sony has been in a lot of hot water lately.
Yes, Sony, as the entire world knows, was hacked. By who is another question. The FBI came out and said it was North Korea. North Korea says it wasn't North Korea. It was the Guardians of Peace, which some people say is actually just another name for North Korean hackers. The FBI received a message from some other hackers who said, you're on the wrong trail. It's a whole long story, but what is known is that this is costing Sony hundreds of millions of dollars. The original number that was set out was around 100 million. Now the minimum they're saying is somewhere between $200 and $500 million that this is going to cost Sony in the end. It's a huge, huge number. It's much, much bigger than the sort of 120 to 170 that the PlayStation hack from 2011 cost them.
Right.
It's a big, big deal. Yeah.
And North Korea's internet was hacked last night, they say, for 9 hours.
Right.
And the U.S. is a suspect now, so it's back and forth cyber attack rivalry.
Yeah, so President Obama said in an interview, this wasn't an act of war, this was an act of very expensive vandalism. And then said that the U.S. would probably pay North Korea back in kind. Now, the U.S. hasn't said that this was them, but yes, the internet was cut off last night in North Korea, and it's still coming to the fore what exactly happened, but the country's internet, which is not good at all in the first place, was shut down.
Is it open to the world, or is it a form of closed internet like we see in Cuba?
So they have internet that connects outside, and through China, which is their one and only ally in the world, but it's only for propagandists, for the sort of the upper echelon who have reason in Korea to use it to gather news, to frame actual news, and to create fabricated stories to let the people know how awesome North Korea is. This is the people who had internet in the first place. Right now they don't, or overnight they didn't, and the U.S. seems to be a prime suspect in this.
And speaking of letting people know how awesome some companies are, Tesla has big news.
Yes, so Tesla announced that they're going to give a try to trading in batteries, so Tesla, the electric cars, normally you have to plug in your car to recharge, and this is a free process. You plug it in. Well, it's free as far as the electricity is free. Now they're going to test in California trading in batteries at a battery swap shop, which should take about 3 minutes to do, but will cost around a little less less than a tank of gas to trade in these batteries. So this is a big experiment. It's a big move for Tesla. Their big question is, do people want this? Better Place, of course, this Israeli company, had tried to do something similar to this and failed miserably. They went bankrupt a couple of years ago. They had worked on trading in batteries and having a subscription, like a cell phone subscription, where you can pay off your car as part of the recharging fee. None of it worked for Better Place. Tesla's been doing much, much better, and surprisingly to me, much better plugging in the cars, which takes time, which takes being connected to a landline, if you will. So it's surprising to me that people really grabbed hold of Tesla because, of course, the technology was really good, but the style of refueling seemed questionable to me. This seems to make much more sense to me, but it seems I'm backwards here. I'm the backwards one because a lot of people worry that this isn't a business model that will work for electric cars.
Well, given the continued terrible news in the oil industry, I hope there's still hope for renewable energy.
Yes.
With these news from Tesla. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
And that concludes our Economy Magazine for today. I'm Ayman Siksak. Thank you for being with us. Join us again tomorrow for more on the economy.